It's I, Wacky Animative here to present you with What If Issei Snapped His Limiter, Part 4. Let's get into this. Currently, POV change. Konako is currently laying down on her bed, thinking about what she's gonna do. She has a few victims inside of her basement of her house. After all, the reason why she has to have her own house in the first place is because Reese is tired of smelling rotten corpses or rotten body parts, and she doesn't approve of her picking up random victims and not erasing memories of other people. I mean, who would believe them anyway? They just look like they're crazy. A wild Nico came out of nowhere and snatched someone in front of them and tore them to pieces. They just look cuckoo and probably into a mental insane asylum. After all, Rias doesn't really care. She only cares about her reputation. She already proved that when she got rid of Issei. The fool thought she actually loved him. Her heart's just like a black hole. It's all-consuming, just like how her love is. She even inwardly thinks and says out loud. She immediately gets up out of bed and thinks maybe I should go downstairs to the basement and maybe say hello to my victims. Or maybe tear a few pieces off. She grins sinisterly. She gets out of her bed. She walks all the way towards her door to her room. She tries to open it, but it's locked. She hears something creaking in her house. She's wondering if any of her prey got away, so she immediately kicks the door from her room and it flies off the hinges. She thinks, oh well, Rias can pay for another one. She runs down the stairs and starts screaming, "You're not gonna get away, my little prey, my little mouse." She screams. And the people downstairs in the basement are shivering. She's continuously running down the stairs, going all the way into the kitchen, searching around. She swore she heard something from the kitchen. She looks around, seeing that there's a knife gone. What would they really do with a knife? They know that she's faster than them. After all, she ripped one of the kids' arms off and made all the other children and all the adults down the basement watch as she slowly teared some people into shreds in front of them. She even left recordings down there playing 24/7 so they can enjoy. She says, and she ends up saying, I kind of wish that I could have gotten Issei to myself. I mean, I could have showed him a very good time in my own little way. He would have been so happy in pieces than how his heart is. Just like his heart, how it's in pieces, he would be in pieces in my care. But I'd stitch him back together again, eventually. She says. She immediately hears a step right behind her. She looks behind her and sees nothing. She's starting to think maybe she's just hyperactive. She walks all the way upstairs, goes into her room, and immediately walks towards her dresser because she noticed that her hair is a mess and she didn't want to sleep with her hair being all a mess and getting in knots while she's sleeping. So she had a brush and started brushing her hair. She looked in the mirror a few times while brushing, but she usually closed her eyes when she's brushing her hair. She opened them one time and then she saw something behind her. Right behind in the corner in the shadows. Glowing green eyes and a low sinister growl. Immediately, she turned behind her and said, "Who's there?" Before she could even finish, she felt her face getting grabbed and lifted up off the air. She starts screaming and saying, "I'll kill you, I'll kill you." And her hands start to grow extremely longer, a lot longer. Her body starts to get a sinister growl coming out of her. Her ears start popping out, her tail pops out, her claws are out, and she starts trying to slash at the stranger, but the stranger just grabs one arm and just snaps it to the side. It's completely broken, just with one single grab, and just a little squeeze and it's broken. Konako just starts screaming, "I'll fucking gut you to pieces, I'll rip you to pieces, I'll tear you to shreds, I'll kill all of your loved ones." And the man just says, "Too late, my loved ones are already dead, but they'll have some company with you there, I guess." She feels her head being squeezed. She could hear cracks going off in her skull. She could hear her own brain rattling. She could feel her eyes bulging out. She's screaming in agony, and the people downstairs are laughing and giggling. One of them is screaming, "The executioner's arrived! Justice!" They're screaming this over and over. Konoko's wondering, who's this executioner? Who has me? What are you? She screams out, and Issei just says, "My name's Issei Hyodo. I think you've heard of me." She immediately says, "No, you're not that perverted loser. You're something else. You're something much more evil, vile." And Issei says, "Oh, I'm vile. You tear people to shreds in front of their families. You rip people away from their families. You destroy everything around you. You are absolutely vile. You're the worst kind of being. Devils shouldn't exist, and I'm the one that'll wipe them all out of this earth," is what he says while continuously crushing her skull, but then stops. Konako sighs in relief and says, "I knew you couldn't do it. You don't have the balls." Right when she said this, Issei said, "Actually, no, I was wondering, how much strength would I have to exert?" He immediately grabs the tip of her tail and says, "To rip this off. This little decoration you have." He immediately pulls slightly, and Konako starts screaming, saying, "No, just don't, please." While Issei says, "I think I will." He slowly pulls, and all of a sudden, Konako hears a tear. She feels every fiber of her tail being ripped off. Every fiber of her being begging to scream. But Issei has his hand over her mouth. She can't scream, and she's still dangling in the air. Issei says, "So, would you like to get this over quickly or my way? More painfully," he says with a smile. His eyes that were glowing green are growing pure red, demonic red, and then to pitch black. And he just starts to laugh sinisterly, and then he yanks the tail extremely fast, ripping it right out of her. She screams so horrifyingly and is begging for him to stop, but no. He says, "Hey, the Drake." The Drake pops out and says, "Yes, partner." Issei says, "Could you heal her tail back?" And the Drake says, "Yes, but why would you want to heal her?" And Issei says, "Well, I haven't had my fun yet." He immediately heals her, and then he rips off the tail again, and she starts screaming more, louder. And the people downstairs in the basement are laughing more, and Issei's laughing even harder. The people in the basement are getting more riled, banging all over the place down there. There's murky water, there's dead bodies and corpses, but they're laughing. They're banging on the door, screaming for help, screaming for their executioner to arrive to save them from this place. And Issei just says, "Konako, my dear Konako, I'll make sure I torture you every day. You don't get to die until I say you get to die, you little bitch." He immediately smashes her face into the mirror, breaking the mirror and digging the shards into her skin, not bothering to remove them out. Just punches her in the gut, and then she completely blacks out. Issei just puts her on his back like a bag of potatoes, right on his shoulder. He walks all the way downstairs, about to exit Konoko's house before opening the door and letting the people in the basement out. Issei immediately tells the Drake to erase their memories and make sure they have a good life. Just don't make it to where they forget the people who have died and who have sacrificed themselves for them, especially the children. They need to know. It may be brutal that they know about this, but they have to know that someone cared enough to actually give up themselves for them. And they need to know of the bravery they showed. But don't show any grotesque things of how they died. Just let them know. And they may mourn for their families and everything, but make sure that they know that they always loved them. The Drake said, "All right, partner." Issei immediately walked down the stairs in the basement, and he saw tons of corpses ripped to shreds, bloody, moldy water on the ground, mold everywhere in the basement, And then he sees 5 young children in the corner of the room, one of them with their arm gone, another one with an eye missing, and one of them having claw marks everywhere on his body. Then 3 adults who are shielding them. Immediately, one adult says, "Are you the executioner?" Issei says, "I'm no executioner. I'm no devil. I'm no angel. I am just me. And that's all I have to say about that." While he says, "You're the executioner. Could you please end me?" He says with a slight smile. His eyes are hollow. Issei says, "No, I won't end you. I'll make your lives better." Immediately the guy is enraged. He starts screaming and grabs onto Issei's collar and says, "Make my life better? I watched my wife and my daughter being killed in front of me, while that monster on your shoulder was laughing, was smiling the entire time, smearing herself in blood, even going as far as making me watch by peeling my eyelids off slowly." And then Issei says, "I know your pain. I've went through something similar." And he immediately just neck chops him, and he falls to the ground into the water. Issei immediately tells the Drake to go ahead and activate the magic. Immediately the Drake activates it, and all of their memories are erased. He immediately puts them back in their homes and drags Konako all the way into his office, all the way into his penthouse. Once he walks into his penthouse, immediately his secretary looks at him and says, "So I see, you've gotten one of them." And immediately Issei says, "Yes, I have. Could you do me a favor and take her into the penthouse dungeon? After all, take her to the lowest floor in the penthouse. Make sure that there's no way for her to escape, and make sure she's tortured every single second. Don't let her sleep any longer than she can without dying, while I try to look up some more information about everyone else. After all, I know most of it, I just don't know their location or whereabouts. They've been off the grid for a while. I guess I may have killed too many devils, too many fallen angels, and too many angels. As long as there's sin, I'll always be there, though," is what he says to his secretary. She just merely nods, and she looks at him while he walks towards his room, and he opens the door. He looks behind him and says, "Oh, also, happy birthday, Mira." She immediately looks at him and says, "Thank you, sir." She immediately thinks in her head, these people hurt you so much. Why do you still care for others? How are you able to? Flashback, POV change, Mira. Mira was only 12 years old. She was running on the streets. She was a devil-angel hybrid. She's the last of her kind, and she was being hunted by devils and angels alike. They finally cornered her at the edge of Kyo. She was about to jump off the cliff before hearing a voice saying, "Do you want to live?" And she immediately says, "Yes, I want to live. I want to avenge my Oni-chan. I want to avenge all of my family, all of my clan. I want to save the rest of them from their horrible lives." Immediately the voice says, "Then come with me, say my name so that I may appear." And immediately she hears a name echoing through his head. "Say the name, Issei Morningstar." And immediately she screams out the name, while the 2 devils and 2 fallen angels are about to strike, one having demonic energy in a ball in their hand, throwing it directly at her, another one having a light spear, both of them combined and are heading directly at her. All of a sudden a magic circle appears in front of her, and then Issei appears directly in front of her and merely slaps it away with one single slap, not even using any of his power. Just a single slap, and every single tree that was in the cliff area just exploded into bits. And even the ocean behind him on the cliff was raging, as if they could feel the storm of emotion coming off this man, as if they could feel the danger and presence. All of the sharks that were at the bottom of the ocean were just jumping up in joy as they saw this man. And The devils and angels looked at this man and said, "No, no, you. It's you, the vile one, the traitor, the betrayer. You should not have even existed. You should just die just like your Before he could even finish it, Issei said, "Just die." He was right behind the devil that screamed this, and with one little tug onto his head, he put his hand on his head. With one little tug upwards, his head was completely clean off. He threw it into the ocean with the body, and the sharks jumped up and ate him. And immediately Issei looked towards the rest of them and said, "So, who's next?" Two fallen angels who had just arrived tried to flee away. They were trying to fly away, but Issei said, "Where do you think you're going?" He merely picked up a little pebble and said, "You know what? I don't want to get my hands filthy with your slutty fallen angel blood. So I think I'll use the mighty weapon of the pebble." He throws it at such velocity and such speed that it crashes into one in the back of the head, and their head just explodes. So does the rest of their body, and there was just a blood splatter. The other one, who was still flying away, looked behind him and saw this and was very scared, because right when it went through him and did that, it's still heading towards him. He decided to go to the side. He moved to the side, and just barely it flew past his cheek, still causing a massive explosion on his cheek. The left side of his face just exploded from it merely grazing him. And he's really glad that he went to the right, but he won't be glad for any longer, because he heard something right behind him. "So you dodged one attack, but how about the other?" He looked behind him in shock, and just was barely able to catch the fact that a fist was enclosing into his face. He immediately screamed out, "No, please, I have a family!" And immediately Issei says, "I once had a family, but they're dead now, just like you." Before continuing his punch immediately hit him in the face, and there was a giant wind pressure, and it was so strong that it went all the way through Ko having windy winds throughout the entire town in that one punch that he did. Then Issei merely fell back to the ground, and immediately Mira didn't even see him move, didn't even see him do any of this, except for throw the guy in the ocean with the sharks. All she saw was him get ready to jump, and this all happened. Back to Issei's point of view. Issei is just looking at the last fallen angel and the other two devils, and he says, "So, are you going to go ahead and do me a favor and kill yourselves, or let me kill you? I suggest the other option. If I get to you, let's just say you won't have a body to worry about." Immediately, the two devils walked towards the cliff and jumped off, didn't even use their wings or anything, while Issei watched as they fell into the ocean and were torn to shreds by sharks, screaming and begging for mercy. As the fallen angel was trying to take this as a distraction and run away, she ran towards Mira instead and decided to go for a hostage. He grabbed Mira by the neck and said, "If you get near me, I'll turn her into ashes. Don't get near me. I swear I will." And Issei just looked into his eyes and said, "Oh, exactly how are you going to do that when you're already dead?" And then he said, "I'm not dead. Why can't I see anything?" His eyes were growing dark. His head was sliding off his body. So were his limbs. Every single bit of his limbs were just sliding off and fell right behind into the cliff. Mira was still grabbed onto by a severed hand, still being pulled down off the cliff, but she was now thinking about her life. "Mom, Dad, Oni-chan, I'm sorry," she thinks before she falls off the cliff. But then she feels an embrace with someone, and looks up and sees that this man, known as Issei, has just picked her up before she fell off the cliff, and immediately put her right beside him. He immediately says, "If you want to live, and if you want revenge, come with me. If you want a normal life, I'll set you up with it." She decides to choose revenge, so she follows him as his secretary. And that's how you end What If Issei Snapped His Limiter Part 4. I hope you all enjoyed, and if you do, make sure you smash that like button. I'm sorry this came out like way too long, but honestly, the reason why this took so long was because I was trying to get my thoughts organized for this. Also, if you don't like this video, sadly, like on this part, I understand. I might redo it. But that's up to you guys. See ya.